right, we are back with another story of our villages in Alaska. We're going to get to know our state one village at a time, and we'll just dive right in. Today we are doing Chickaloon and Chignik, Alaska. Yeah, Chickaloon is probably one of the funnest village names to say, and one I can actually pronounce because, you know, when you get the mixture of native and Russian, and then the American names are the ones I can pronounce. When you get one that's called Chickaloon, it's just kind of fun. So today we'll start with Chickaloon, Alaska. It's located 26 miles northeast of Palmer, Alaska, and it's in the midst of the Talkeetna Mountains. It's an area often referred to as sort of on the road to Glen Allen. We'll say, you know, the road to Glen Allen, it's on the way that way. So we'll kind of talk about it that way. It is up that valley. Chickaloon sits in a beautiful valley near the famous Matanuska Glacier, which is a popular hike for those who want to do like a glacier hike. So if you visit Alaska and you go, I want to hike a glacier, and you come into Anchorage, you're most likely going to end up at the Matanuska Glacier, and you will drive through Chickaloon. Now, Chickaloon gets its name from the Chickaloon River, which flows into the much larger Matanuska River, which is kind of the, the middle of it's a large valley up in there. Famous place. I don't know if it's famous, but a lot of pilots fly up through there. The Chickaloon River is named after a guy named Chief Chiklu. Chief Chiklu. The village was established in 1916 as the last stop on the Matanuska branch of the Alaska Railroad. So it is the last stop there. Chickaloon first shows up in the census in 1930 with 28 residents. And a lot of the histories of these places, it only goes back, starting in the early 1900s. Alaska's history really has so much unknown to it. All these villages just start, 100 years ago, not even that long ago. The info we have going further back is just so scant. It's hard to unravel it all. Anyway, in the 2020 census, Chickaloon was home to 254 residents. The residents are mostly white, Caucasian, but the native population is a mix of Atna and Danaina Athabascan people, so a little bit of a mix there. So my first question was, who was Chief Chiklu? They named the Chickaloon River, or maybe it's Chickaloon Creek. That's probably Creek, because it's just a small creek coming out of the Talkeetna Mountains there. It trickles down into the Matanuska River. But who is this guy, Chief Chiklu? And I couldn't really find information about him. I kind of did a lot of searching, and it just says he was the first chief of Chickaloon. So I'm not sure. That would be interesting to find out. So I don't know. However, the current chief's name is Gary Harrison, who serves as the Chickaloon Village Traditional Council leader. And he's the longest standing member of the council. And he's been there since 1984. So he's been there about as long as I've been alive. So a long history there. The name for the village is actually the official name on their village constitution is not Chickaloon. It is Ne Dini Ana. Ne Dini Ana. I'm probably not pronouncing that exactly the way they would, but what can I say? I'm an outsider. I'm doing the best I can to pronounce it respectfully. So the village is called Ne Dini Ana. It is a traditional village, they say. And it's used in the Constitution. So I used AI, because AI is the new thing, and I asked AI to translate this word to English. And it said the word translate to yes in the Tlingit language. So I thought that was interesting. And now it is kind of cool because, I studied an indigenous language in Mexico, and, the yes in that language, which is the Tarahumara language, you'd say ayena, or some people just kind of say ah sound. And so that ah sound is a very affirmative sound. It does just kind of make me speculate a connection between the languages. I believe they are in the same language family, I didn't take that deep of a dive. Um, but I do like to see connections between languages and just that ah sound. Like down there, ayena is a popular way to say yes. And here you might say ne dini ah. And that na sound is also an affirmative. So really interesting. And there's a book coming out soon by a friend of mine called They Had Names by Nathaniel Jeanson. And I highly recommend when that book comes out, you buy it. It should be out really soon. I have read kind of a pre-release version of the book, and it's absolutely fascinating because he takes a deep dive into some previously unknown histories of Native Americans. And that is a fascinating topic. Like I said, even in Alaska, it's just gets super gray and fuzzy when you get past like 100 years. And so Dr. Jeanson is attempting to bring some focus to that. So anyway, I digress, but make sure you keep an eye out for They Had Names by Nathaniel Jeanson. Really interesting stuff. Anyway, a neat thing is the local school teaches the Atna Athabascan language as a part of its curriculum there in Chickaloon. I thought that was pretty cool to preserve some of the old languages. The town is featured in an episode of a cartoon called Molly of Denali. My daughter has watched Molly of Denali. It's a kind of a sweet little cartoon about a native girl living in Alaska. It's a lot like what's the Mexican girl, little girl show? Oh, what's it called? Nah, it's not coming to my head. I'm a guy. What can I say? I don't like think of that kind of stuff. What's her name? Hmm. There's like a movie. Anyway, it's a lot like that show. You probably know what I'm getting at. It's like a little Spanish girl, but this one's called Molly of Denali, a little native girl. Very, very similar. Fun little show. Anyway, the Chickaloon is featured in an episode of that show. All right. Now, in the early 1800s, there was a Russian Orthodox church in Chickaloon. So that puts the date back to the very early years of the arrival of the first Russians. So as far as I can tell, today there's no longer a Russian Orthodox church there, but it does seem like there was a presence there in the past. However, Chickaloon is home to a place called the Chickaloon Retreat Center, which is an 80-acre property. It is run by the Covenant Youth of Alaska. And if you look back at Carl Thistle's story, an interview I did recently, or a few weeks ago now, I think. He is a part of the Covenant Youth of Alaska. It is an organization still going today. And they run this Chickaloon Retreat Center. About 20 years ago, Don and Effie Graham donated the land to the Alaska Conference of Evangelical Covenant Church, and it became a place for pastors, church staff, and lay volunteers to receive spiritual, physical, and emotional renewal, and has become more recently expanded to serve the youth from the area. So there's a little camp there, have a couple of cabins, and it looks like a beautiful place. On the pamphlet, it says their mission is to provide a place and facilities where individuals and groups encounter God. It does look like a place where you can, if you're a part of a church and you want to plan a getaway or retreat, you could go to this place for your getaway. So it's a good thing to keep in mind if you're looking for that. The Chickaloon Retreat Center does have a small airstrip called Graham Airport. It's not registered. It does not show up on my ForeFlight, but it does look like it's a grass airstrip, about 2,400 feet in length, give or take. So that's a very comfortable length for a small plane. There's also nearby is King's Ranch. If you go back from last fall, I recorded an episode with Dwayne King and Joe Gerwig, and they lead a ministry called Kindom Air Corp, and that's located at King's Ranch. And Chickaloon is the nearest town to King's Ranch, and King's Ranch is a ministry called Kindom Air Corp, and they train pilots from private pilot all the way up to commercial and CFI to prepare them for missionary aviation work. And so that's a pretty neat thing there near Chickaloon, Alaska. All right, that's all for Chickaloon. The next village we're going to do is Chignik, Alaska. Chignik is kind of far away from Chickaloon. That's what happens when you do alphabetical, I guess. Chignik is located on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, which is a bit of land shooting out of the main body of Alaska. You all kind of know what I'm talking about. It shoots out towards the west and it becomes the Aleutian Chain. So just before it starts breaking up into islands on the south side, that is where Chignik, Alaska is. So just glancing at this place on Google Earth and stuff, my first thought was, this looks like another beautiful place of seclusion. Just looks like a beautiful place. It's only accessible, like many villages in Alaska, by plane or boat. It sits in a remote bay called Anchorage Bay, not to be confused with Anchorage, the city. It's actually 450 miles from Anchorage, the city. So it is a very remote location. And it just looks beautiful. There's a lot of high mountains around, and then you got the low bays into the water. So you get that contrast of elevation. It just looks beautiful. Let's see. Chignik first shows up in the census in 1940, reporting 224 residents. In 2020, there were 97 residents. So it's come down quite a lot. Over 60% of the residents are Native American. So what I noticed here was if there's 97 residents, so we'll just say there's 100, 60% are Native. So we got 60 Native people. And then we have about 32 white people. And then 8 people are a mix of other things. It says Asian, Pacific Islander, Latino, and mixed race. So mostly Native, but a lot of whites. And there's, with only 100 people there, this is a small village. Now, an interesting note is that the young man who designed the Alaska state flag, his name is Benson, was born in Chignik. He was born in our village today. Benny was born in 1912 to a Swedish-American father and an Aleut Russian mother. So Benny was the product of Alaska's history because he was a mix of some of the major people groups living in Alaska at the time. You got Swedish, American, and Aleut Russian mother. So he was a mix of them all. So probably a good representative to make our flag. He designed it. He did it in 1927. He was only 14 years old. In 1927, the Alaska Department of the American Legion sponsored a contest for students between 12 and 18 years old to design a flag for the territory, because Alaska was just a territory at that time. And previous to this, Alaska had only flown the U.S. flag since they purchased Alaska in 1867. So there was no Alaska flag. That is until Benny came along and won this contest. So it's kind of a neat tidbit about Alaska's history. For this contest, there was over 700 submissions for flag designs by these teenagers. Many of them featured the midnight sun, some the northern lights, polar bears, and gold pans. But it was Benny's design who won. He had a cash reward of $1,000. He got an engraved watch and a trip to Washington, D.C. So thank you, Benny. Of his design, he said, the blue field, or the blue background of the flag, it's like a dark blue. The blue field is for the Alaska sky and the forget-me-not, an Alaskan flower. The North Star is for the future state of Alaska. I like that. The most northerly in the Union. The Dipper is for the Great Bear, symbolizing strength. So if you've seen the flag, it is like the Big Dipper with the North Star and with a dark blue background. And that's the Alaska flag. I love it. I think it's pretty cool. So that was Benny's design. Now, since then, it has become the state flag when Alaska became a state in 1959. And Benny Benson has had a mountain, a major street in Anchorage, a memorial, I think at a small park, an airport, and a school have been named after Benny Benson. Benny passed away in 1972, and he was from our village, Chignik. That was pretty cool. Another notable person from Chignik was a man named Reuben Hilborn. Also known, you could probably hear my kids playing outside. They're running around outside right now. Let's see. Reuben Hilborn was also known as the Singing Fisherman, who is described as an Alaskan country gospel artist. They say he had a way with old hymns, which was revolutionary at the time, playing his guitar aggressively as opposed to using an organ or piano to play hymns. So I did go on and listen to one of Reuben's songs, and it definitely does have that country kind of small town classiness to it. It kind of reminds me of like Johnny Cash, or if you can think of Elvis playing gospel music. It sounds a bit like that. So definitely sort of new and original back at that time was the Singing Fisherman, Reuben Hilborn, born in Chignik, Alaska. So that's kind of cool. Now, some of the history of Chignik on the same location, there was a. No, this is a difficult word because it's a native word. I'm doing the best I can. Kaniagmuit. Kaniagmuit. That sounds better. Kaniagmuit Native Village. So that's a group of people. I don't know anything about that group there. Kaniagmuit Native Village. The village there was called Kaluak, and it was destroyed by the Russian fur boom in the late 1700s. So there was another tragedy in Alaska's history. Now, in the late 1800s, the village was renewed and became a fishing village and a cannery. And it adopted the name Chignik, which means big wind. So probably a windy place. Most notably, a four-masted sailing ship called the Star of Alaska, or its original name was Balclutha. The ship was built in 1886, and it is actually still around. It's preserved in the San Francisco Maritime National Historical Park. It became the Star of Alaska after a career of trading in Chile, Australia, New Zealand, and Burma. It even said it went around Cape Horn like 17 times in 13 years. So this ship has really sailed around the world quite a bit. But later it was used for trade in Alaska. And while sailing in Alaska's waters, it struck a reef off the coast of Kodiak Island, is renamed from Balclutha to Star of Alaska. It transported workers and supplies between Chignik and San Francisco, California. And interestingly, the workers were Chinese and Japanese. So if you can imagine a ship full of Chinese and Japanese sailing between Chignik and San Francisco, that is what happened with this ship. Interestingly, the ship was sold to someone in 1933, and it was renamed the Pacific Queen and appeared in a film called Mutiny on the Bounty, starring Clark Gable and Charles Laughton. So even Hollywood has a connection to our village today, if you can believe it. And I think there's a movie from the 80s with Mel Gibson and some other big names. I think it's just called The Bounty. And I think it's the same story. It's a true story. And these guys did a mutiny against their captain, and they ended up hiding in Tahiti, I think. Yeah, it's just kind of an interesting story. Anyway, I think this Clark Gable movie is about the same story. And this ship was used that, sailed to Chignik. Anyway, I'm really going down bunny trails, but they're fun trails. I like this stuff. All right, it looks like Chignik, in the Chignik area, there was also a lot of coal mining between 1899 and 1915, but apparently not anymore. Now, today, Chignik is dominated by the presence of a Trident Seafood facility. Trident is possibly one of the largest seafood companies in the world. They have 28 facilities worldwide and one in Chignik. I can still hear my kids playing outside. Well, you can bear with the extra noise, I guess. If you have eaten fish from a fast food restaurant, it's very likely to have passed through one of these 28 facilities in Trident. So if you had fish from McDonald's, say, what you're eating may have gone through Chignik, Alaska. So how about that for a connection to you? This company, Trident, the company was founded by a man named Chuck Bundrent over 50 years ago. It's become a very established part of Alaska's fishing industry. Definitely the largest company in the Alaska's fishing industry. Just a huge, huge place. Good company as far as I understand it. There is a Russian Orthodox church in Chignik, but it looks like it's unused. It's just an old, unused building. I wasn't able to find any other information about it other than I can tell that there is an old building there. Do not think it is being used. So I just assumed that the Russians built it either before the village was destroyed in the late 1700s or in the late 1800s when it became a fishing village. So, however, the neighboring village is surrounded by two other villages with the same name. One is Chignik Lake and Chignik Lagoon. Chignik Lake has an Orthodox church that appears to be up and running today. Some more history was I was able to find a missionary couple named David and Sally Hill who worked in Chignik starting in 1986. But I have not found, and they were with Interact. And you can go back and listen to the Interact episode. And yeah, we're coming full circle on some of the history. It's cool. But I haven't found any more information about David and Sally Hill. There are some reports of a few other missionary efforts in Chignik, but there's not much data on it. About it there for the 100 people that live in Chignik. So that is it for our two villages today, Chickaloon and Chignik. And now next week, we are going to hit two more villages, both called Chignik, but one is called Chignik Lagoon and the other one is called Chignik Lake. So we are just kind of hanging out there in Western Alaska for this week. And it looks like next week, Chignik Lagoon and Chignik Lake for next week. All right, guys, that is it. Thanks for this week's episode about the villages of Alaska as we get to know our state, just one village at a time. I'm hoping for some interviews coming up, but it's been a very, very busy season. And the interviews have kind of gone by the wayside lately, but I'm going to try to get some before the very busy summer hits when I probably won't even do any episodes because it's just going to be go, go, go. So thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to get to know our state one village at a time. We will see you next week for Chignik Lagoon and Chignik Lake. We'll see you then.